What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates from the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've already shouted out the fact that we got an amazing show tomorrow morning on Dave Chappelle, comedic genius, or should we cancel his ass? People on different sides of the table. That's the show in the morning, but I wanted to. So, man, like I see my man, Billy Agnew, man. I'm going to bring you on the air, man. Give me a thumbs up. I'm going to do this short and quick. I'm just going to bring you on the air, man. I got a lot on my tick. What's up, Chief X? Hey, Billy, man, give me a thumbs up, man. I want to bring you on the air, man. I got a lot on my chest, man. I want to dialogue with somebody who can help me dialogue through it. If you got a second, man, give me a thumbs up. I'm going to bring you on this shit. Let me see here. I'm going to just try to bring you on, brother. If you can accept it if you can. If you can't, it's all good. So I could do it without you, but I just saw you come on the air and I was like, let me dialogue this with somebody, man. I'm trying to bring my boy Billy on with me. William Agnew, I should say. I'm sorry. I know him from years ago. I don't know if it's gonna let me bring him on, man, but looks like I might can bring him on. Hold on, it might be working out. Give me a second, y'all. Let me see if I can get this brother on, man. I definitely want to get into this conversation. I'm actually headed to another gig, but I can't get it off. It's been on my mind all day. All right, y'all. I ain't gonna keep y'all waiting. I don't know if it's gonna let me bring him on or not. All right, let me just get into this thing, man. So I labeled this thing defeatism, and I put the Popeye's chicken. Obviously, it's gonna grab people's attention. But the reality that I wanted to talk about is I hope y'all can bear with me. Again, I go by the name Black Socrates. I'm always thinking and philosophizing about our community. I do the work of mental dialogue. The answers in the name itself, mental dialogue. What I always say is, if I can improve the conversation inside your own head, then you'll be better. And if you're better, our community's better. And so that's the work that we're constantly doing at Mental Dialogue. And so when I talk about the term defeatism, what I'm talking about is, all right, it says tell him to hit the green button. Somebody says tell him to hit the green button. I don't know what that means. I'm trying to bring you on. I'm trying to bring you down. Well, I'm gonna do this one more time, y'all. Hold on, what does it say? No answer. All right, brother. I was trying to get my man on. I wanted to do this with somebody. All right, let me just do it myself. So there's a lot of defeatism in our best narratives. What I mean by that, I'm talking about specifically within the African-American community, the Black community, whatever you want to call it, African community, however you want to name it. There's a lot of defeatism in our best narratives. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So something that we consistently say is we got to do for ourselves. We got to do for ourselves. And while I agree with that wholeheartedly, the space that we're saying it from is not usually from a place of love and understanding to our economic reality. It's usually said from a standpoint of the idea that as if we won't do it for ourselves. People will say, well, I don't know why we won't. Like, we say it from a place from a negative space. I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about when I say defeatism. If I simply said, in general, if I were to simply say, Black people, we're fucked up. That literally will get a round of, like, what I'm saying is, like, I'm just saying, like, in a room of just Black people. If I was to say, man, Black people, man, we out here, we fucked up. I'm talking about in our thinking. If I was to say that, we would get this big, loud round of applause. Again, as long as you're saying it in the right room, right? not putting it out for other cultures, but within inside the culture, we would agree that in a lot of ways we're fucked up. Like you will get a agreement on that. And so when you're in that room and you start talking the word, and everybody loves to say, when you start talking solutions, people want to talk solutions, and their solutions are platitudes about how we just need to do for ourselves. We need to stick together more because we're coming from this place of that we don't stick together. We're coming from this place that we don't do for ourselves. Popeye's chicken is the perfect example. So the Popeye's chicken thing happens, and there's all these people that are spitting this negative energy about the fact that people are in line for Popeye's chicken. Now, within our community, we pretty much assume that the majority of that line is just us. And even if it is, doesn't make a difference in the point I'm trying to make here, which is we don't get into how the why. We don't get into the how and why this human phenomenon of this chicken going viral and people in line for hours. We don't really get to we don't get outside of a linear thinking concept of how it happens. We keep it simple, and I'm not saying we keep it simple to be negative. This is just what humans do. We like our brains do this. We simplify things down into a simple narrative for us to be able to understand it. But in doing so, when we simplify things like that, it makes it easier to come up with negative narratives about our own people that are absolutely unfair, such as we put all this money in these white people's hands because we let this silly ass chicken go viral. Like that's the perspective that people will keep talking about, or saying we're getting distracted, or the other thing is we don't support our own chicken stores, people with great chicken sandwiches. I even saw maybe 2 weeks ago, I saw someone get a list of like 14 different black-owned restaurants that had chickens, and it said, chicken sandwiches that were better than Popeyes. And it was 14 stores on the list from around the country. I'm thinking, it's 14 Popeyes chickens in Atlanta right now, within a 40-mile radius of where I live. Like, hear me out. I'm not saying this to be negative about the person who put up the 14 chicken. Like, that's cool. Put them up. Go support them. I'm a big believer. I say it all the time. Buy black. It's revolutionary. Like, I believe in buying and spending with our own. So I want to make that clear before I make this bigger point. The bigger point being the how. Like, if you're catching when I'm explaining, hey, nice that they're able to put up the 14 chicken stores, individual mom pop stores. They got a chicken sandwich that's better than Popeyes. I get putting it up at this time, but I don't get putting it up and dogging our people out because they just got caught up in a marketing human phenomenon of buying a $4 piece of chicken. Like, it's not abnormal that a marketing thing takes place that works in the world and it catches people up. It doesn't happen to just black people. Like, we think about, we get upset about how we're in line for Jordans. We never think about the multi-millions of dollars of marketing that went into having people stand in line for Jordans. Like, we never think about that. That is a realistic, real life aspect of, it's a real life aspect of how marketing works and target marketing works. So while we have a propensity, for example, to stand in line for a pair of Jordans per se, other cultures stand in line around the world. You see it all the time for the things that they're interested in. That is just a human nature thing. And so we get upset with our people for getting in line for an affordable sandwich. Like, it's that simple. There's no more to it than that. No more to it. Like, there ain't nothing wrong with us for getting in that line, but we talking shit like there's something wrong with us, like we're doing something different than other groups. We're not. This is the perfect example. A week ago, somebody put up a black-owned beauty store that opened, did $50,000 in the first day. Because I've been saying the whole time, we do support our own. I'll give you another perfect example. If you saw my video a couple of weeks ago, where we went out and supported the We Buy Black convention. We all out there. Let me even add this to be very sincere. We out there supporting people. My partner, I was low on funds, and my partner made it so that I could go. But here's a real life example. Let me tell you about that. I love that convention. We Buy Black. We was out there in droves. It included $20 to get in and $10 to park. Let a mall right now, a mall that we frequent, charge $30 for us to come in the mall. We not going to that mall. I don't care how much we've been there. Like, I hope people are catching how I'm handling this. Like, stop saying we don't support our own. In most situations, when we see these big things like a Popeye's chicken, hold on one second. Hey, Queen, is it full? Can I go over to the overflow? Can I go over to the overflow? It's full. Yep, it's just, I need to pull it back. Yeah, this is full. Sorry, y'all. So when we see this Popeye's chicken phenomenon thing happen, man, it's just a thing about a scalability. Here's a reality for, us in business as an entire community. The reality is the opportunity for us to scale, like a lot of these businesses that have scaled up over 50, 60, 70 years, that's not our reality. So I just did a show with a sister about a month ago, and she loves teaching our community about franchising, whether it's being part of current franchises or setting up our businesses so that we can franchise them. Once you get your standard operating procedures in place and you want to franchise, she loves teaching that information. That's something that is very needed in our community. And the very real reality is we're just getting to the stage to have a sister like that in place to teach that to our community. That's a reality. Some people will look at our reality as an excuse, but if you start calling a reality an excuse, then you will never come up with a solution for why something continues to happen. You will be run on the rat wheel of why. A lot of times we quite often say, oh, we know the problem. And I say, hell no. We look at the problem and then we start asking why. People will say, well, if you start talking about why does this exist? Like, for example, why does a Chicago happen? I'm tired of using that example. But when you get into it, when you start saying, well, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, where housing discrimination pushed all the Black community into these ghettos, when you start saying, well, that's the why these places where the manufacturing and the jobs left. So when you start talking about that why, people will start saying you're making an excuse when, unless you dig into the why, there is no solution. People will say, well, yeah, I know that happened, but you should just decide different. How do you just decide different if for 30, 40 years, defeatism has been the lay of the land? The lay of the land for the last 30, 40 years, I've mentored in these schools that lack these expectations. And so people will say, well, they have a lack of expectations. They need to have a bigger expectation now. Just pop up and have it? When they can see, across the city, there's other schools with these other facilities and these other opportunities that they don't have. They're supposed to just pop up and have the same expectations as this school that has never had these problems have. That's how we just choose different. Or do you peel back the original why and reverse engineer from the original why? If you're currently in a city where, for example, around the country, unemployment for teenagers is about 17%, but in Chicago that's pushing 50, 60%, and Philly is pushing 50, 60% currently as we speak. Well, meaning even if all the kids wanted to work, half of them can't, even if they went out looking and tried. And if you get into a survival situations, people typically make a couple of decisions. Try to work for under the table, which is illegal. Go into criminality, is obviously illegal. Or be defeated and go homeless. These are all reasonable decisions in a desperate survival situation. And so if a community stays in a survival situation over the course of 30 or 40 years, and now the unfortunate thing that happens over that long is some values that are not the best values to progress become part of the community. And so if you want to look at the results 40 and 50 years later, when those values that are not helpful have become a part of the culture, but 40 or 50 years later, you just want to blame the culture for having the lack of value at that point and say, decide different. What kind of solution is that? It's not one. You have to go back to the why and reverse engineer the psychological damage. That's the reality. And so even in our best narratives, we got to do better. We just need to do for ourselves. We're saying it from a place of defeatism. But I promise you, as we continue to grow in business and some of our smart businessmen, build up some of these dope Black-owned restaurants that we have, and they start to franchise. I got the Wing Bar here in Atlanta. They opened up their second location. Everybody knows about Slutty Vegan and that queen opening up another location. And so these things are current realities that make sense right now for where we're at, for the amount of time that we've been allowed to even, in a sense, have access or get ourselves in a position to take and control our destiny. These are new realities, whether we want to accept that truth or not. Because they are new realities, then there has to be a foundational buildup to more of us having the mentality that we always talk about we should have, but we say it as though we should automatically have it, as though the last 40 or 50 years have not been in existence. When you understand that reality, in a decade from now, if Slutty Vegan is in the whole South region, that makes sense. Watch how we stay standing outside her doors like we already do right now in Atlanta. Slim and Husky, franchising. These things are happening at a very realistic tick, at a positive tick based on our current reality. But within our own community, some of our what we consider positive narratives that we supposedly agree on often have hidden defeatism in them, and we are looking down on our people subconsciously, unfairly, in a way that makes no sense based on our collective reality. We definitely have individuals who break away despite some of our collective reality. Or we even have family structures that have remained intact, who've created generational wealth, who we can look to and try to emulate and copy more of and say, that's better than what we've currently been doing. But we will dog our community out as if we just don't want to do what's better. The psychological fight to get people to do better comes from natural cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance that humans just happen to have when there's a long held belief and you present them with the truth. Myself, we're all susceptible to it. Our brains do it. So we will fight against sometimes what's best for us based on long held beliefs or conditioning. And we'll turn around and be mad at people for rejecting maybe great advice without understanding why the rejection takes place. It's a thing that we're all capable of doing. There's a couple things I can say right now within this video that would trigger people who may be agreeing with me up until this point. But for example, if I was to just put out, for example, just a loose fact of that African Americans, blacks in this country were not indigenous to this land. There are people right now who live and die by the fact that in their eyes that we are indigenous to this land, and they could have agreed with all the stuff that I've said up until this point. But if I say we're not indigenous to this land right now, and they believe that based on their research, then they'll dismiss the whole video. Or another, I'm just giving that weird example. It doesn't fit this context, but I'm just trying to explain that there are triggering things that make sense. Like, I get why they're triggered because I understand cognitive dissonance. It's a term coined by Franz Fanon, a Frenchman philosopher that I admire, who coined the term cognitive dissonance. And so a lot of people are learning about the term, whatever, but you have to be aware of it, and it plays a role in reaching out and doing the mental work of a community that has collectively been traumatized by America's history. And people will literally say, well, you're just making an excuse, because we see examples of individuals who have broke away from that thinking, which is a beautiful thing. But the reality is, like my man Dr. Sunjata always says, and this is a reality too, that there are systems have designs. And so at any given point within this history of this country, when it comes to the African American community as a collective, there's never been a given time in which we didn't have a 1% of us that thrive despite the conditions in this country. We still continue on that cycle where there is a small percentage that have succeeded despite all odds. But if you keep seeing something repeat itself continuously, then that's when you can probably say, oh, okay, there's something systemically happening for the outcome to continue to be the same. And what we tend to do, if you've been able to break away from this negative paradigm, this post-traumatic slave syndrome stuff that some people completely dismissed, and I think Dr. Joy DeGruy got exactly right. Again, if she got it exactly right and it's a reality, then you must take a psychological solution to the mental issues that keeps getting these negative outcomes. But if the consistent thing is there's this small few that continue to rise to the top within our community, and that's kind of always been the case, then we have history showing us there are systemic issues that the words, minute you use systemic, you'll sound like an excuse to those who've been able to escape the negative thinking. Well, until you remove the systemic issues, then the system will get the same results every damn time. And so I'm just kind of getting a lot off my chest. Don't even know if this went exactly where I wanted to go, but I'm ultimately telling you that, matter of fact, let me tell you what sparked it, and I'm out of here. What sparked me even doing this video is I end up listening to Sharice DeCoe's show on WFRG this afternoon, and I saw a brother explaining that Black Wall Street wasn't ended by the destruction of the bombing of 1619 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, but by integration. That's what actually killed Black Wall Street, due to our people thinking that the white man's ice was cold, and so we stopped shopping with our own and shopping with others. And I called in to dispute that and say that's not a full context of what really happened. The full context was a large portion of our community. If you can go look at the economic factors to measure at that time, I've done the research, was for the most part, the collective was on average worth $0. But we did have our black enclaves in certain places: Winston-Salem, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Atlanta, Rosewood. So we had these black enclaves in certain parts of the country. And ultimately, for those who had figured out and learned how to do for themselves, they pretty much continued until typically outside factors play a bigger role in that, in those communities not continuing or thriving. Or what happened around the country in the 70s was the government literally put highways literally down the middle of these communities and split the communities, and it had a huge, way more bigger economic factor on the continued success of those communities than now. Think about this, how the narrative makes no sense the way we say it today, that integration killed some of our communities that were thriving. Like, I'm gonna tell you how it makes no sense. So you're telling me that our ancestors who were thriving on their own get an opportunity to somehow start using white people's businesses and just gave up on their own? No, that's not a reality for what our ancestors did. We had plenty of ancestors who basically had nothing. The only reason they were even agreeing to go to the back of these damn businesses, to go through the back door to get these businesses, because this was the only business in town that they could work with. So so in most of these places, there wasn't we didn't have these black businesses that we were frequenting, and then we get integrated, we stop going to our businesses and start going to theirs. No, that's not what happened for the few blacks who were able to experience some of the black enclaves. The majority of blacks were not in these places at all. And so they unfortunately accepted the embarrassment of having to go around the back, sit on the back of the bus, because for most blacks, it was the only damn game in town. So yes, a culture that was coming out of enslavement, that was told you was inferior and told you was beneath the scum of the earth, and still having to sharecrop and rely on and be dependent on another culture still, even after being free from enslavement. The majority, unfortunately, were. Like, the numbers don't show otherwise. Like, literally, by the turn of the century, 90% of us were still in the South. The Great Migration that you hear about took about 40 years before, a lot of us was in Chicago, a lot of us was in New York. And these things, it took a long time for this migration to take place. And the reality is, for the enclaves, no, integration didn't affect them. There were highways, systematic attacks. Or, for example, I'll give you one last example, and I'm off this piece. So in 1935 or 37, we had 137 black-owned banks. Now I think we may have 17 as of 2019. So if you just put that number, lay it out there real simple, linear thinking. Wow, we had 137 in 1935. We got 19 black-owned banks in 2019. From a linear thought, that looks like, damn, what we doing, black people? When integration, we had 137 black-owned banks, and we only got 19 now. So from a linear thought, and again, let me even give this premise. When I first saw how many banks we had in 1935, I was like, damn, we really done lost our mindset. Like, I thought this too. Again, now with more research, see, this is like when you're open to new information, when you're a truth seeker, when I do more research and find out more information, then I get an understanding of what happened to those 137 black-owned banks at the turn of integration. A lot of them went away at integration point. So I get the linear thinking saying, oh, we just ran out to these other banks. That's all we did as soon as we got integrated. No, I learned more information, such as, wow, the Supreme Court of Topeka Board of Education, whatever, how we say it, the Board of Education, Thurgood Marshall, was bringing forward the integration things for the schools. At the same time, the NAACP had a cadre of lawyers who strictly focused on antitrust. Strictly focused on antitrust. The antitrust was a big thing in the country for the larger community due to what had happened. Yes, what had happened when U.S. Steel and all these monopolies kind of came and just was doing all kind of ruthless stuff to keep competition out of the industry. And so eventually the government started attacking monopolies, saying, "Hey, we don't want this. This doesn't really open up competitiveness in the markets." And so this was a huge issue with unions and things of this nature. So the majority community was in that battle. Well, from what I understand now, from some I came across this research, the NAACP was real in depth with their cadres of lawyers of helping push some of those briefs and things that would push the issue on, making sure that there were antitrust laws in place. Because W. Du Bois, one of the founders of the NAACP, had said years ago that with the way things were going with business and with monopolies, there wasn't going to be a chance for small businesses to compete in the country. This was something that was happening for all races, all cultures. When W. Du Bois was saying this, he was saying with these monopolies in place, then small business will easily get ran out or won't have a chance to stay in business. That's what's going to happen if these antitrust laws don't get put in place. And so that's where this cadre comes together, and they played a big role in ensuring, because here's how a two-pronged attack happens. So as you know, they're shooting for the education of the integration education, because unfortunately, you know, when you're working, you know, we know that a lot of the schools were getting books 2 years behind, or in facilities that were dangerous. So a lot of these things were part of the issues